With gas prices rocketing in recent years, this Adelaide factory has largely gotten off it.
It's not something we could sustain or absorb or pass through.
Companies that haven't made the switch have suffered. Some manufacturers have shut. So from 2027, we're going to keep more East Coast gas for our own use through a federal government reservation scheme to lock in between 15 and 25% of supply here, which could make prices cheaper on the East Coast.
The hope is that this might bring that price down by at least a couple of dollars a gigajoule, maybe between 10 and 20%. That's the sort of number I think we're talking about.
Australia is among the top 3 exporters of liquefied natural gas. But that export market and burning gas to stabilise our electricity grid has caused prices to soar. Western Australia doesn't have this problem. A reservation scheme in place for decades.
We believe
government confirms plans for gas reservation on East Coast. Good day, policy watchers. Welcome back to the Meridian Report, where we break down the political moves that actually matter. Today, we are talking about something that affects every single Australian, whether you realise it or not. Gas. Natural gas. The stuff that heats your home, powers your stove, keeps your electricity grid running, and apparently, we have been shipping it overseas while Australians get hit with eye-watering energy bills. But hold on, because Energy Minister Chris Bowen just dropped a policy bombshell that could change everything. The federal government has confirmed plans to force gas producers on the East Coast to reserve between 15 and 25% of their gas for domestic use. Translation? Australia is finally saying, hey, maybe we should keep some of our own resources for ourselves instead of selling it all to the highest bidder overseas. Revolutionary concept, right? Quick favor, if you are loving this, hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell to keep getting the latest updates on politicians around the world. Cheers if you did. Now, back to the show. Alright, let us break this down, because this is one of those policies that sounds simple on the surface but has massive implications for the Australian economy, energy security, and our relationship with the gas industry. Chris Bowen announced that the government will be consulting with the gas industry on a plan to reserve between
that this is good policy based on our experience from Western Australia over recent decades, which has developed a strong and robust gas industry,
helping make Australian manufacturing more competitive.
Because we have external or international competitors who don't have the same energy issues that we're faced with, it's been on our radar for quite a while.
That we can export a vital natural resource, make almost no profit from it, and crush local companies through the process has been a unique feature of the East Coast gas market. Today, a step to rectify it. Daniel Ziffer, ABC News.
(15 and 25% of gas extracted on the East Coast for local use. The goal here is to shore up domestic supply and put downward pressure on prices. Now, if you are sitting at home thinking, wait, we have been exporting gas while Australians struggle to afford their energy bills, you are absolutely right to be confused. Because that is exactly what has been happening, and it is one of the most absurd policy failures in modern Australian history. Let me paint you a picture. Australia is one of the largest exporters of liquefied natural gas in the world. We are up there with Qatar and the United States, shipping massive quantities of gas to countries like Japan, China, and South Korea. We have got enormous reserves off the coast of Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria, and our gas companies are making billions of dollars selling it overseas. Sounds great, right? Australia is a resource powerhouse, raking in export dollars and strengthening our economy. Except here is the problem. While we have been exporting all this gas, domestic prices have gone through the roof. Australians are paying some of the highest gas and electricity prices in the developed world, even though we are sitting on enormous reserves of the stuff. It is like owning a bakery and going hungry because you sold all your bread to the neighbors. It makes absolutely no sense. So how did we get here? Well, the answer is a combination of poor policy decisions, industry lobbying, and a government that prioritized export revenue over energy security. For years, successive governments allowed gas companies to lock in long-term export contracts without any requirement to reserve supply for domestic use. The logic was that the free market would sort it out, that if domestic prices got too high, companies would naturally redirect supply to meet local demand. Spoiler alert, that did not happen. Instead, gas companies kept exporting as much as they could because international prices were higher, and Australian consumers got left holding the bag. Businesses shut down because they could not afford their energy bills. Households struggled to heat their homes in winter. And all the while, gas was being shipped off to Asia while Australians froze and paid through the nose for the privilege. The previous coalition government tried to address this with the Australian Domestic Gas Security Mechanism, which was supposed to ensure adequate domestic supply, but it was toothless and barely enforced. It was like putting up a beware of dog sign when you do not actually own a dog. The gas companies knew there were no real consequences, so they kept doing what they were doing. And now, finally, the Labor government is stepping in with a more aggressive approach. By mandating that 15 to 25% of gas must be reserved for domestic use, they are essentially saying, we are done playing nice, you will keep some of this gas in Australia, or there will be consequences. Now, before we all start celebrating, let us talk about the challenges here, because implementing a gas reservation policy is not as straightforward as it sounds. First, there is the question of how much gas should actually be reserved. Chris Bowen said the range is between 15 and 25%, but that is a pretty wide gap. 15% might not be enough to meaningfully impact domestic prices, while 25% could seriously disrupt export contracts and trigger legal battles with gas companies who have already signed deals worth billions of dollars. The government is consulting with the industry, which is code for, we are going to negotiate and try to find a number that does not result in us getting sued into oblivion. Second, there is the issue of enforcement. How do you actually make sure gas companies comply with the reservation policy? Do you impose penalties for non-compliance? Do you require them to report their extraction and sales data to the government? What happens if a company claims they cannot meet their export obligations because of the reservation requirement? These are complicated questions, and the devil is always in the details. If the policy is too weak, it will be just like the previous mechanism, all bark and no bite. But if it is too strong, it could scare off investment in the gas sector, which would be bad for jobs and the economy. Third, there is the geopolitical angle. Australia's gas exports are a critical part of our economic relationship with countries like Japan and South Korea, who rely on our gas to keep their economies running. If we suddenly reduce the amount of gas we are exporting, it could strain those relationships and give other countries like Qatar or the United States an opportunity to swoop in and take our market share. The government needs to be very careful about how they communicate this policy to our trading partners, because the last thing we want is to damage our reputation as a reliable energy supplier. But here is the thing. Despite all these challenges, this policy is absolutely necessary. Australians have been getting ripped off for far too long, and it is about time the government put domestic energy security ahead of export profits. The gas industry is going to scream bloody murder. They are going to claim that this policy will kill jobs, destroy investment, and turn Australia into an economic basket case. Do not believe a word of it. This is the same playbook they use every single time a government tries to regulate them. They said the same thing when the mining tax was proposed, when carbon pricing was introduced, and when renewable energy targets were set. And guess what? The industry survived every single time, because at the end of the day, they are still making enormous profits. What this policy really represents is a shift in thinking about how Australia manages its natural resources. For too long, we have operated under the assumption that the free market knows best, that if we just let companies do whatever they want, everything will work out fine. But the gas crisis has exposed that assumption as complete nonsense. Sometimes, the government needs to step in and make sure that national interests are protected, that Australians actually benefit from the resources that belong to them. That is not socialism, that is common sense. And let us be real here, the gas companies have had it pretty good for a very long time. They have been extracting resources that belong to the Australian people, selling them for massive profits, and paying relatively little back in taxes and royalties. The least they can do is make sure that Australians have access to affordable energy. If they do not like it, they are welcome to pack up and leave, but something tells me they will find a way to make it work, because the profits are just too good to walk away from. So what happens next? The government is going to consult with the gas industry, finalize the details of the reservation policy, and then implement it. There will be pushback, there will be negotiations, and there will probably be some legal challenges along the way. But if Chris Bowen and the Labor government stick to their guns, this could be a game changer for Australian energy policy. It could lower prices, improve energy security, and set a precedent for how we manage other natural resources in the future. And honestly, it is about bloody time. For everyday Australians, this policy could mean lower energy bills, more stable electricity prices, and a government that actually seems to care about their well-being instead of just catering to corporate interests. For the gas industry, it means they are going to have to adjust their business models and